Welcome to The Needle. Today I'm going to be talking to Janet Lopez, who's one of the rising stars in the world of music supervision here in Los Angeles and worldwide, no doubt. She's done Veep, HBO's beloved comedy, and also recently All the Way, which is the LBJ story with Bryan Cranston and Anthony Mackie. Welcome to The Needle.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So you are a music supervisor, which from my perspective as a musician is sort of like a mythical creature. It's not someone you ever get to meet, but it's someone who really holds the keys to the kingdom in a lot of ways for you as a musician.
Well, that's flattering, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the truth. You choose, or at least get to strongly suggest, what goes in a lot of the film and TV that we see.
Yeah, I mean, as a music supervisor, there is a lot of influence, paid to a television show or a film. And so, our work is primarily done in post, but depending on the movie, there could be, or the television show, there could be a ton of production work. So, we'll get involved from the development stage and pre-production, with pre-records on cameras, conversations about budgets and licenses and attorneys that need to be involved, et cetera, to sort of prep for production, execute that, and then get into the songs and everything that you would hear kind of playing from a source, from radio, from a car, and suggest what might be a good fit for those characters in those environments.
Right. So from a musician, a music creator's point of view, if I got a song to you that might be really appropriate for some project you're working on, how long would it take from the moment I get it to you to the moment I get paid?
So if you were to work on a film, it could be a year and a half.
Right.
If you were to work on a television show that's airing now and that's posting now, it could be a matter of, a couple of months. Studios have different timetables. So if there's so much that goes into pitching music to a music supervisor, and all of that work, it's back and forth, it's relationship, it's the tone of what I'm listening for in the movie. And so if I'm listening for something, that whole pitching process, that can take, a couple of weeks, sometimes months. I'll love a song for years and I won't have an opportunity to use it. So that person and I will have a relationship for, months, years. But if it worked in a movie that was in production and wasn't airing until 2017, and they won't get paid until likely after it airs. So it could really be quite a timetable. And then for a television show like Veep, that's happening now and that's posting now. If I'm on the mix stage today, then I can send a confirm and you can get paid within the next, 30 to 60 days.
So your life is actually quite varied depending on if you're putting songs or if it's a score, maybe an orchestral score working with one composer. I imagine you can find yourself on a scoring stage one day and down at Amoeba Records looking for a needle in a haystack the next. Yeah,
I mean, if there's a film that has a composer where he's on a scoring stage and, if it's done here, then we'll have, depending on the size of the score, if it's orchestral, I mean, that's a whole other part of music and music for film and TV. So it's custom. There's a composer, there's an editor, there's music, there's an assistant composer. So that's sort of one kind of listening and really, really special. And then for the Amoeba side of it all, I mean, that also, just as a music fan, you'll find yourself there and looking for something that isn't necessarily related to what you were just on the mix stage for or on the scoring stage for. And you'll, just fall in love with a song, or you've been wanting to get your hands on something, and so you're flipping through the country section, and then you find, oh, well, it's right next to, jazz. I wasn't going to look for jazz, but there I am.
Right.
And so
there's a lot of serendipity involved.
Yeah.
Right.
You discover music in a lot of different ways.
Is that how all this starts? Before, the road to become a music supervisor, I imagine, starts with being a music fan in your teens, and then
it did for me.
Inexorably becomes, did you fall into it, or did you want to be it?
A lot of people like have that story where they fell into it, sort of, they weren't looking for this job, and that's not mine. I sought it out. So when I was like just a kid, really, one of the things I wanted to do was put music to film. I just didn't know what it was called. I didn't know you could even get paid for it. I just thought of it as like a sort of a fantasy, job. And then when I was in college and I was starting to think seriously about my future, I thought, what if this is a dream, like a reality? So I went crazy trying to find out what it was called. And I kept thinking like, is it music editing? Is it composing? And I would throw all of these names out. And I even went to the Yellow Pages and just called people that were called composers on the Yellow Pages, and they thought I was strange and had the wrong number. Some of them even offered me jobs, actually. It was kind of cool. But eventually, I got in touch with the right person at my school at the time, who was a music business professor, and Alex Sema was his name, and he was on the head of the California Copyright Conference, that board. And so I explained to him what I wanted to do, and he says, "Do you create music?" And I said, "No, I just love it, and I'd love to be able to put it to something like I'm choreographing the scene in some way." He says, "Oh, you want to be a music supervisor?" So I said, "Okay, how do I do that?" And then once I knew what it was called, it was easier to get there. Right. I knew what to look for, and then I fell in love with the kind of filmography that people had, developed over the years. And this was like in early 2000s, so names like PJ Bloom, who I'm now fortunate enough to work with at Neophonic, had been put on my radar. So I was able to track the work of people that I now know and admire, and in some cases get to work with.
Do you get hit up all the time by musicians and composers and songwriters? I mean, them knowing that you're a music supervisor, does it interfere with like having friendships?
No, but doesn't it, like, if you were someone that was in a position to give them a gig, suddenly you become a closer friend. So there is a little bit of like, if I don't know you that well, and I love honesty in everyone, so especially in music. When you're listening to something and it's good, it's not trying to sell an idea. So
if a composer were to ask you on to his web show, for example, no, I'm kidding.
Hey, though, I'm a fan, so in many cases, they're doing me the favor. Right. I would love to be friends with everyone who I listen to, whose music I have on my shelves. Right. That's not the case, but there are a couple of times, quite a few times a day, where you'll get sent emails from people you don't know who are just trying to send you music.
A few times a day?
Quite a few times a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you, I mean, I imagine you just eventually get to the point where you don't get back to them, right? You've got work to do.
I try to, but it's not, if my whole job revolved around listening to music and writing back to people telling them how great I think it is, I wouldn't have a job, and they wouldn't email me as much because I wouldn't have a show to put it into. Right. There's a lot of politics and business that goes into what I do. So there's, an actual job that needs to get done that sometimes has nothing to do with listening to music.
Tell me a bit about the range of the film music landscape, because there's many sorts of music that go into a project. There's source music coming out of a radio in a scene, and then there's huge big pop songs. Mm-hmm. Is there a smart bomb approach for a composer that's trying to get his stuff into film and TV projects? Yes.
They should know, if they're going to send a music supervisor music, what that music supervisor is working on. They shouldn't just send a random sample or their greatest hits record. They should do some research. If they have a sense of the shows I'm working on and know the kind of music that's in those shows, some of them are into their 5th season, then they can kind of approach with that in mind. Say, hey, I've been a fan of Veep. I know you've been using a lot of, sort of big incidental background music, and at times a little bit more featured up front known artists. Would you be interested in this catalog that I represent, et cetera? And it's a way of starting the conversation from a point that's real and not just very ambiguous. Yeah. I have this great song.
Do your research then if you're going to approach someone.
Yeah.
Right. What's the bane of your existence in terms of being a music supervisor? Is there something that you could do without? Is it the emails all day, every day from people that want their music used?
I think someone who's so pushy and who just doesn't know when to stop, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot, you know, there's some finesse that it takes with like any relationship. If we were just friends, you don't just call the same person over and over again asking them what they're doing on Friday. So I think that if I could have people just take it easy and have more confidence in the fact that, you know, it's a business relationship and at some point we will get in touch, and to just trust the music for it to speak for itself, I will call them back. I do listen to what I'm sent.
Are there any common mistakes that you hear that you listen to maybe songs and you think this would be great, but just for this one thing that they do in the music, then I can't use it for that?
Yeah, profanity that happens with.
Right.
So clean versions of songs. You know, I don't want to hold someone back from doing what comes naturally. So if it's a song that's laced with all of that, then great. You know, it doesn't have to be for network television, but it is very helpful for there to be like a clean track or something that is, you know, I guess a radio version of that song. Yeah.
And should people submit instrumentals and like a full various mixes?
I will always ask for instrumentals, but I will request them. So they shouldn't just be sent as part of the submission.
Yeah.
If something works and I'm trying it against picture, then as part of the editing process, I'll probably need an instrumental anyway, and I'll just reach out for it. Otherwise, I'll just have duplicate songs, you know, in my system, clogging up my system.
Right. And I presume everything's gone digital these days in music supervision?
Yes. Yeah. For the better, I think.
Right.
I mean, there's so much of what we do that needs to be instantaneous, you know, and people have gotten used to having access to what they need within minutes. So, you know, having CDs at one point was great. You can take a look at all of the, you know, the pamphlets that came with it and read about the artist and, you know, get to know the liner notes. And unfortunately now, it's just about the content. And the good thing about that with regards to my job is that you could, you know, send a lot more and just sort of get to the point much faster. I don't have to tell the story about the band. I could just send the song and
this is all done by email these days?
It's all done by email, and if I'm sent music, it's digital. If I'm requesting music, I request it digitally. People still want to send me CDs, and it's great, but I'd actually rather, if you're going to send it to me, send me vinyl. So I can listen to it at home and then ask for a digital version for my show.
So you're a vinyl person?
Yes. A lot of us are now.
Right.
It started with, you know, just growing up and having access to what was it like on my family shelves, and now it's expanded. I have that now as well as stuff that I get for myself.
You're at sort of two extremes. You've got the vinyl on one side and then the supervision emailing digital or MP3s, I presume, in emails.
MP3s, high-res files all the time.
Right. Interesting. And you work with the director. Is that the person you work with a lot?
The director and filmmakers, the producer, producers, and so there'll be, you know, there'll sometimes be just a lot of people on one show, especially a television show. There tends to be quite a few producers involved.
And are they looking for high profile or known tracks, or are they just looking for a moment where they fall in love with the track?
Well, everyone wants to fall in love with the track, but I think that in some cases, in order for them to make a statement, that, you know, they do want something that's recognizable or something that can, you know, if we're looking at, you know, our main character who's in his 60s and he's not really hip, that if he were listening to music on his own, that it'd be something that had already kind of been established and out there, and you know, he'd be into like Fleetwood Mac or something, you know, really tough. Like the first thing I think of is Billy Joel. If I think of
that's your idea of tough.
It's not tough.
That is some pretty tough music.
Love
there.
him, but no, I wouldn't say
just the way
tough.
you are. I'm too scared to listen to that song.
That's Yeah, no. There's, you know, you can get into, you can get into genres, you know, and start listening to classic rock or something that's just established and at that time, you know, in that case, a little bit more expensive. And so you have to consider budget, you have to consider just the parameters of the show.
That must be tough when you feel that a song is so right and then you can't get clearance for it, or it's just not within budget, and yet you know it would make the scene because you work with this stuff all the time. It must be sort of frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, but you know, that's part of what we do as well. So there's going to be a perfect song and a desired song. Sometimes it comes from the film, like the director's favorite song perhaps, and they really want to use it, and I'll totally, like, I'll love it and I'll want to make it happen as well. But money can get in the way, the scene itself, if it's controversial or whatever. But the good news is that that's why I'm a part of the show. That's why music supervisors are a part of the show. They can suggest alternatives, something that, you know, is great and it may be even coming from a different angle, you know, taking it from another approach, and suddenly you love it more than what you had originally had in mind.
I always remember Stuck in the Middle with You during the Reservoir Dogs torture scene. That's sort of like playing against, you know, what you would expect, and it kind of worked really well.
He's just genius. Quentin Tarantino is genius with music and storytelling.
Cool.
That's like, what a mecca. Yeah.